Hello and welcome to this module which is on case study research design. Case study research excels at bringing us to an understanding of a complex issue or object and can extend experience or add strength to what is already known through previous research. Case studies emphasize detailed contextual analysis of a limited number of events or conditions and their relationships. The case study is a useful tool for investigating trends and specific situations in many scientific disciplines. The case study method has been especially used in dietetics, social sciences, psychology, anthropology, and ecology. It is a common approach in healthcare research. This is because the units of interest in healthcare research are patients, practice, or health system, can often be easily bounded and seen by the researcher as a case. Coming to the definition of case study, case study is defined by individual cases, not by the methods of inquiry used. The case study approach allows in-depth, multifaceted explorations of complex issues in their real-life settings. The investigators identify the boundaries, and these boundaries, what is and what is not a case, are continually kept in focus. According to Baxter 2008, a case may be simple or complex. It may be a single patient, a practice, a healthcare system. Researchers may study a single case or multiple cases. In multiple case studies, researchers study cases in depth individually as well as look across cases for similarities and differences. Types of case studies according to the sampling unit. The sampling unit can be a person, the study of one single individual, generally using several different research methods. The sampling unit can be a group, the study of a single distinctive set of people, such as a family or small group of friends. It can be a location, which is the study of a particular place and the way that it is used or regarded by people. The sampling unit can be an organization, the study of a single organization or company and the way that people act within it. The sampling unit can be an event, the study of a particular social or cultural event and the interpretations of that event by those participating in it. Coming to the type of case studies according to the objective of the research, Stake 1995 identifies three types of case studies. They are the intrinsic, the instrumental, and collective type. Intrinsic type of case studies are aimed at understanding a particular case because the case itself is of interest. Example, how one person managed a stroke. A case may be of interest because it has particular features or because it is ordinary. The instrumental type of case study is aimed at providing insight into an issue or problem or to refine a theory. In this instance, understanding the complexities of the case is secondary to understanding something else. Example, case study of a problem with healthcare. Next is the collective. The collective type is a number of case studies are studied jointly in order to understand a phenomenon, population or group condition. often referred to as a multiple case study. Example, 15 primary care practices are studied as single but conjoined cases in order to understand how obesity is discussed in this setting. The main characteristics of case studies are as listed by Hayes 2000. A descriptive study is one in which the data collected constitute descriptions of psychological processes and events and of the context in which they are occurred, that is, the qualitative data. Next, the main emphasis is always on the construction of verbal descriptions of behavior or experience, but quantitative data may be collected. Third, high levels of detail are provided. In the narrowly focused case studies, characteristics are they are typically a case study that offers a description of only a single individual and sometimes about groups. Often the case study focuses on a limited aspect of a person, such as their psychopathological systems. Combines of objective and subjective data. Researchers may combine objective and subjective data. All are regarded as valid data for analysis and as a basis for inferences within the case study. The objective description of behavior and its context. Details of subjective aspects such as feelings, beliefs, impressions, or interpretations. In fact, a case study is uniquely able to offer a means of achieving an in-depth understanding of the behavior and experience of a single individual. Next, we come to the process-oriented method of case study. This method enables the researcher to explore and describe the nature of processes which occur over time. In contrast to the experimental method, which basically provides a stilled snapshot of processes, case studies may be continuing over time, like for example, the development of language in children over the years. Case study research often involves the use of multiple methods for collecting data. By using multiple sources of data and both qualitative and quantitative data, researchers may attain the richest possible understanding of a case. The qualitative method of participant observation and interviewing are used for data collection in case studies. We shall first look at the participant observation method. The objective of participant observation is to help researchers learn the perspectives held by study population. As qualitative researchers presumes that there will be multiple perspectives within any given community, the researcher would be interested both in knowing what those diverse perspectives are and in understanding the interplay among them. Qualitative researchers accomplish this through observation alone or by both observing and participating to varying degrees in the study community's daily activities. Participant observation always takes place in community settings, in locations believed to have some relevance to the research questions. The method is distinctive because the researcher approaches participants in their environment rather than having the participants come to the researcher. Participant observation data consists of the detailed field notes that the researcher records in a field notebook. Although typically textual, such data may also include maps and other diagrams such as kinship or organizational charts. Another method used for data collection in case studies is interviewing. There are three fundamental types of research interviews. They are structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interviews. Structured interviews are essentially verbally administered questionnaires. The researcher has a list of questions which will be asked with little or no variation and with no scope for follow-up questions to responses that warrant further elaboration. This method is relatively quick and easy to administer and may be of particular use to provide clarification of certain questions if required, or if there are likely to be literacy or numeracy problems with the respondents. However, by their very nature, they only allow for limited participant responses and are therefore of little use if in-depth is required. The unstructured interviews do not reflect any preconceived theories or ideas and are performed with little or no organization. In this type of interview, the researcher starts with an opening question such as, "Can you tell me about your experience in the local market?" Then the interview will progress based primarily upon the initial response. This method is very time consuming, often lasting several hours, and can be difficult to manage. The interview is not guided by predetermined questions on what to talk. Hence, the researcher should have had a good training in the area and previous experience. For example, a dietitian will have the expertise in carrying out a case study relating to food and nutrient intake of hospital patients. Semi-structured interviews consist of several questions that help to define the areas to be explored, but also allows the interviewer or interviewee to diverge in order to pursue an idea or response in more detail. This interview format is used most frequently in healthcare, as it provides participants with some guidance on what to talk about, which may be helpful. The flexibility of this approach, particularly compared to structured interviews, also allows for the discovery or elaboration of information that is important to participants but may not have previously been thought of as pertinent by the research team. To substantiate the information on a case, supportive data from sources such as letters, newspaper articles, administrative records, patient health records, archival records like census records, survey records, name lists, physical artifacts like tools, objects, instruments, and other artifacts often observed during a direct observation of the subject are valuable. Now let us see how to design and conduct a case study. The first foundation of the case study is the subject and relevance. In a case study, you are deliberately trying to isolate a small study group, one individual case, or one particular population. According to in 2004, case studies can be designed in 3 steps as follows. The first step is to define the case that you are studying. Arriving at even a tentative definition helps enormously to organize your case study. Generally, you could stick with your initial choice because you might have reviewed literature or developed research questions specific to this choice. However, a virtue of the case study method is the ability to redefine the case after collecting some early data. Beware, when this happens, You may then have to backtrack, reviewing a slightly different literature and possibly revising the original research question. A second step calls for deciding whether to do a single case study or a set of case studies. The term case study can refer to either single or multiple case studies. They represent two types of case study designs. You also can choose to keep your case holistic or to have embedded subcases within an overall holistic case. For example, your holistic case might be about a diabetic patient's glycemic control and the family's food habits could serve as an embedded subcase for which you also collect data. A third step involves deciding whether or not to use theory development to help to select your cases, develop your data collection protocol, and organize your initial data analysis strategies. In general, the less experience you have had in doing case studies, the more that you might want to adopt some theoretical perspectives. Without them and without adequate prior experience, you might have trouble convincing others that your case study had produced findings of any value to the field. Conversely, highly experienced case study investigators may deliberately avoid adopting any theoretical perspectives, hoping to produce a break the mold case study. Now let us look at some guidelines for conducting a case study. First, plan and design how you are going to address the study. Make sure that all collected data is relevant. Unlike a scientific report, there is no strict set of rules, so the most important part is making sure that the study is focused and concise. Make yourself a short list of 4 or 5 bullet points that you are going to try and address during the study. For example, case studies in clinical research can be, in principle, be used to test any theory that has implications for individual patients. 5. With a case study, even more than a questionnaire or survey, it is important to be passive in your research. Be an observer rather than an experimenter. Even in a multi-subject case, each case can be treated individually and then cross-case conclusions can be drawn. Here is an example of a case study outline for a hospitalized patient. Case study outline. The following is a brief outline on which a registered dietitian would develop a case study to plan the medical nutrition therapy for a patient. First, look into the patient profile. Then, pathophysiology, treatments, and medical nutrition therapy. Standards of practice. In this section, the dietitian will provide general information about the medical conditions and treatments that would be utilized in evaluating and planning care for the case study patient. Patient history and clinical course. Nutrition assessment. Anthropometric, biochemical, clinical and dietary assessments. Nutritional interventions. Evaluation and monitoring, which is the care plan. Composing the case study report. A case study can be documented in many forms. A case study is generally a story. It presents the concrete narrative detail of actual or at least realistic events. It has a plot, exposition, characters, and sometimes even dialogue. The researchers address each step of the research process and attempt to give the reader as much context as possible for the decisions made in the research design, and for the conclusions drawn. Contextualization of the case study. This is a detailed explanation of the researcher's theoretical positions, of how those theories drove the inquiry or led to guiding the research questions. This can include the participants' background, the process of data collection, the training and limitations of the coder, along with the strong attempt to make connections between the data and the conclusions evident. Condensation of the narratives. The researcher may have recorded exhaustive descriptive information from the participant observation or interviews. This has to be summarized in different sections, like for example, in a diet history case, at least the following 4 questions must be answered in separate sections. Incorporate headlines that encapsulate information from text. Provide a summary on nutrition assessment, noting any assumptions made. Identify and justify the optimal clinical goals and objectives of dietary management in order of priority. Include quantifiable goals. Outline a client-focused approach for implementing these goals, including suggested changes. Finally, prepare a plan to evaluate the effectiveness of the intervention. Implications. Because case studies tend to be exploratory, most end with implications for further study. Here, researchers may identify significant variables that emerge during the research and suggest studies related to these, or the authors may suggest further general questions that their case study generated. Format of a case report. Develop the case report completely and in a logical manner. The report is to be written in prose style. Do not reiterate the question on your paper and then answer it. This is a technical report and should contain medical and scientific terms used in an appropriate fashion. Also, the researcher must indicate what has been learnt about the disease process, example, and their nutritional implications. Therefore, in parenthesis, briefly explain what your terms mean so that it is readily evident that you understood what you have been describing. Example, hypoglycemia, low blood glucose. How to analyze the results. In case studies, analyzing results tend to be more opinion-based than statistical methods. Prepare analytical summaries with supporting data appendices. The usual idea is to try and collate your data into a manageable form and construct a narrative around it. Use examples in your narrative whilst keeping things concise and interesting. It is useful to show some numerical data, but remember that you are only trying to judge trends and not analyze every last piece of data. Constantly refer back to your bullet points so that you do not lose focus. Present data in colorful and/or unique graphic representations. Strengths of case study design. One of the greatest strengths of the case study design is its adaptability to different types of research questions and to different research settings. The use of multiple sources of evidence allows triangulation of findings, which according to Yen 2009 is a major strength of case study design. Case studies also offer the benefit of studying phenomena in detail and in context, particularly in situations where there are many more variables of interest than there are observations. Another potential advantage of case studies is that the format may make the researcher accessible to wider readership than some other designs. However, there are some weaknesses of case study design as well. Nevertheless, case study research has its limitations. One technical issue is a variant of what is known as selection bias, whereby the choice of cases biases the findings of the research, particularly with respect to excluding cases that contradict favored theory. Another concern raised is generalizability, particularly of single case studies. Certainly, if the research findings need to be generalized statistically, then a case study approach is not suitable, although other forms of generalization may be employed. A further concern about case study design is that since neither experimental nor statistical controls can be used in case study research, internal validity, at least as it is understood in quantitative research, may be hard to establish. To conclude, case study can be used as a method of data collection in research in specific situations. Qualitative data is predominantly collected in this method, which is frequently substantiated with quantitative data. The person conducting the case study is the researcher, most often, and having training in the relevant field and previous experience in conducting case study are desirable skills. Case study data can be analyzed by presenting the data as trends. Usually, such information gives rise to a hypothesis which has to be tested by carrying out further research. Thank you.